Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today is psychology time, so I wanted to talk about PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. This has been throughout history. It's more recently become a diagnosable thing. I want to say in the 80s, it became aware in the DSM-3, and a lot of people have suffered from it. Most commonly, people see like war veterans and that kind of population with this disorder, but that's not always true. There's a really cool place, if you Google PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, you can take a survey on what might be happening. And again, this is with any type of PTSD. So if you answer yes to at least one of them, I would talk to a therapist about it, because again, PTSD affects people on a very big level, and when I look at psychology, I look at everything on a spectrum. So like if you hear about autistic children or autistic individuals, they're somewhere on a spectrum. I believe that with all diagnosable features, anyone can fall anywhere on a spectrum of that diagnosis, whether it be little to none at all or a very high degree of that disorder. So with that being said, something to look at is, have you ever experienced this kind of event where something, maybe a serious accident has happened, physical or sexual assault, natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, a war, like you've gone to war, or if you live in a country where war is rampant, you might live through it every day. Seeing someone be killed or seriously injured, having a loved one die through homicide or suicide, or just in that you being close to that person. Trauma is a very diverse thing, so it doesn't just happen to a specific population. And I always tell everyone, I'm like, here's the thing about trauma. Everyone has their own version of it, so let's not war story about our traumas, because again, then you're undermining someone else's trauma, and that trauma is just as real as your trauma. So if you answered yes to that, I would say again, like, seek the help of an individual who can help you work your way through this kind of thing. A well-known therapy to use with PTSD is cognitive behavioral therapy, and EMDR, which is eye movement rapid desensitization. And that is something that's a little more cautious, because if it's not done the right way, it can actually further worsen your PTSD. So definitely make sure who you're going to do EMDR, they are actually qualified in doing it, and not just took classes on it, because you do have to be certified to be able to do EMDR. And even those who do EMDR can sometimes mess it up. Sometimes it's not intentional, and sometimes it's just because the person may have not learned to its full extent. Another thing to look at with PTSD is, have you had nightmares about this before, or have you thought about this when you really haven't wanted to? If you've thought about this trauma over and over again, or had continuous nightmares or night terrors, because that's a very common symptom of PTSD, is night terrors, anxiety, depression, and stuff like that. And I'm not always about medications, but sometimes an SSRI is helpful, and they're not always lifetime. This is something that can help you for the meantime until you can overcome your trauma. SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and they're meant for depression and anxiety. They can be meant for other stuff too, but that's what they're most commonly used for. So if you do have nightmares, or you think about these events on maybe daily, weekly, monthly, and it's not really wanted, it just kind of happens, you can say yes to that and talk to a therapist about that. Another one, let's say in the past month you've tried hard not to think about the event, or went out of your way to avoid situations that remind you of the event. If that has happened to you, you could have PTSD. So answering yes to any of these could possibly mean you have PTSD. Been on constant guard or watchful, or like with me, sometimes I can't have my back facing a door. I don't know why. I just can't sit still if my back is facing a door. It's part of my anxiety. of my PTSD. It just keeps me just like, sometimes you'll see me sweating bullets if it happens. I mean, I do it sometimes to try and overcome it. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it is still something that I try to avoid having myself have my back to a door. So even at my office, my desk, I can see the door. Everywhere I go, make sure I can see the door. Another thing to look at is in the past month, with that being watchful and on guard, how intense has it been? Think about that as well, because that's something you can mention to your therapist if you already have one. If not, I would suggest getting one. Also, if you've in the past month felt emotions of numbness, kind of detached from people, things around you, just you don't want to be a part of society, you sometimes might want to isolate yourself. That is also kind of a symptom of PTSD. So if that's happening, I would also consider the possibility of you might having PTSD. In the past month, maybe of a guilty feeling, like you're to blame for something when you're not really blamed for it, like this event happened because of you, or you could have done more to help with this event. That's why in some cases with war, some people feel like they could have helped their buddy who may have passed away because of a gunshot wound. Some people take blame, and that's how PTSD can arise too. With other events, like maybe they could have warned their parents or loved ones about this situation of a hurricane, tornado, or done something more. They feel like they are somewhat to blame for it. Blame is a huge contribution to PTSD as well. So that's something to work on as well, because it is not your fault. Crap happens on a daily basis. So if you're telling yourself that you're to blame, try and work on around that as well. So those are just some simple things you can think about with PTSD. PTSD is a very complex disorder, like I said before. It has so much about it. Like when I think about PTSD, I do not just think about PTSD. I think about everything that can encompass it. So when I think about someone who's getting diagnosed with PTSD, I don't see them just being diagnosed with PTSD. I can see anxiety, an anxiety disorder, depression disorder, eating disorders, sex disorders. There's so many things that can accumulate to PTSD that affects a human being that I don't ever just see it as PTSD. When I say it's a very complex thing, it is a very complex disorder. Because originally it was called shell shock. Before that, I'm not sure if it had a name, but it really came to light with the first World War I, World War II area, where people were seeing horrific things on the battlefield. These are men that didn't have an option to like say, I will serve my country. It was, you're going to serve your country. And they had to go to war. So they were forced into seeing this stuff, and they would come back and they would have no help. For the longest time, the military would just say, hey, you did your time, bye, thanks, bye, and left them with no resources. Recently, the military has very much helped with giving people options for when they get out. Like they make them go through training on resume writing, finding places where you can job hunt, professional attire to wear to a job interview. And that's one thing I can respect of the military, is they're helping more now. Before it was just boot you out, you're gone, deal with it. And that's when you would see people very violently attacking their family members, their loved ones, wives, children, and sometimes even taking their own lives. So eventually people were like, this is a thing. This isn't something we can ignore anymore, because it is affecting a lot of these men and their families, because PTSD can also be passed on to family members, is what some people don't know. That trauma's affected you so much that it's affecting your mindset and how on guard and hostile, angry, sad, depressed, isolated you might be towards someone, that it can be transferred to them. So kids can get PTSD from their parents and how they act towards them. Chronic PTSD, which is C-PTSD, this one is something that's more intense too. This happens to individuals. It's sometimes where the PTSD is on and off. It's really intense at times. like every here and there, like once a month, every other month, I'll have a night terror and it'll wake me up and it'll freak me out. Sometimes PTSD is a short act thing. It's something that can be easily overcame, and sometimes it can last for quite a while. It's just how you work on it. So if you decide that you want to put it on a shelf and not deal with it, that's when things can intensify. So that's why I always say, if you're dealing with any of the stuff I just said, try and reach out to a professional, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist. See your options. Again, within the pagan and Wiccan field, I know a lot of Wiccans don't want to use medications because it affects their energies towards their belief system, and I get that. There are also holistic approaches. There are different like teas and different types of stuff you can create. There are different activities, hobbies you can do to help manage your stress and anxiety. But I do sometimes say that sometimes if none of that stuff helps, the last resort is medication. I'm not a person that pushes medication because, again, I'm not about big pharmaceuticals making money off of me. When I become a psychologist, wouldn't want to do that to somebody just for extra money. I want someone to be fully mentally well from their own standpoint. Again, I don't push medications unless they are needed. I only suggest them when they're needed. And that is the truth, because sometimes people don't need medications. They might just need therapy. Some people might need medications. Like when there's an intense schizophrenic or an intense bipolar disorder, there are times that medication is needed. And I'm sorry to say it, there might not be a holistic approach to it to help. Because again, just because one thing, if you hear someone say, well, this worked for my cousin, I swear it'll work for you, don't believe it, because everyone's different. It's almost like sometimes the placebo effect. At first, you'll feel like, yes, this is working, but then when it wears off, you're going to keep searching. So sometimes it's best to, in certain cases, it's best to use medications and then go from there and then see what things happen. If down the line you don't have to use those medications anymore and you can wean yourself off of them, you never just go cold turkey off medications, because again, there's a chemical reaction in your body that when you start messing around with those chemicals and all of a sudden rip them out, it's going to affect your behaviors, your brain, and your mentality. So keep that in mind as well. This is going to be a short version of PTSD because PTSD is a very, very, very huge field of psychology, and it'd be an entire series. Next time, I also want to talk about certain things like queer theory, feminist theory. These are all qualitative approaches and theoretical areas, because right now, again, because I've taken this class twice for my first master's and then my second master's, because my first master's wasn't clinical, so I have to take stuff over again because this is clinical. So qualitative is a very fun field for me. That's what I want to do my dissertation in. And they're always like, do you want to do a conceptual framework, a theoretical framework? Mine's more theoretical because I'm thinking of doing queer theory, feminist theory, because I want to do stuff on women with PTSD, with impulsive actions. Because again, within the field, bipolar disorder, with bipolar disorder and ADD, they say men are more likely to get ADHD than women, and women are more likely to get bipolar disorder. So, well, not more likely, but ADHD would look like bipolar disorder in a woman, where ADHD is in a man. So different people have different opinions on this. I don't know where I would stand on it. So I do believe women have ADHD. I've seen it before, so I do think there's an impulsive nature there. So for this fact in my dissertation, I will call it impulsivity, and how that PTSD can affect them. I'm not sure if I want to just solely base it on war, or if I also want to do it on the fact that there's still a lot of sexual assault going on within the military, not just with women, as well as men. So there's that. So until next time, be prepared for other stuff like queer theory, feminist theory, and whatever y'all want to come up with. If y'all think of something you want me to talk about, I will talk about it. I love psychology, therapy is my field. I love it. I'm super passionate about it. I want to hopefully be a pagan Wiccan psychologist, where it's not just working with the pagan Wiccans, but that's who I want to be able to come to me, because I know there's a lot of pagans and Wiccans out there who wish they had something like that, because we have our belief system is very old, and it is the foundation of a lot of stuff. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the things in Christianity came from paganism. So it's very much about being educational and having a culture of people be able to come to me and feel trusted, because other people might say that, hey, I don't want to touch that, because I also have somebody in my life who went, and she is a part of the SDS, which is the Satanic Temple, or TST, so the Satanic TST, I think it's called, and was turned away from a therapist here in Colorado because she didn't want to deal with a Satanist, and that is unethical in all ways. So I can talk about ethics too if y'all want. There's so much about the psychology field I love to talk about, so whatever y'all want to come up with and talk to me about, I'm ready to talk about it. Until next time, hope y'all have a good one, and I will talk to you later.